This is Matthew, host of the Superhero Ethics Podcast, and I've got an ethical question for you. If I'm trying to help you not listen to ads, is it ethical for me to do an ad to help you do that? If you go to our website, theethicalpanda.com, and just click on the join button, for $5 a month, $55 a year, you get to hear all of our episodes without ads. Was I ethical in doing this? Let me know. Hello and welcome to this episode of Superhero Ethics. Friends, have you ever wondered what would happen if Magneto didn't have a Professor X to keep him in line and he just got really, really evil? That's the kind of question that gets talked about in the new TV show. It's been out for a while, but season 2 of it just came out recently, Gen V. This is Generation V. It's a part of the Boys universe. And I have Ocean Murff here to talk with me about it. Ocean has been... was one of the co-hosts of the Adrian Moment, a great podcast about sports movies on hiatus at the moment, but has also just been a guest on all sorts of podcasts all throughout the True Story family. And I've been a co-panelist with him a number of times talking about various movies. And so when I heard that he was really into The Boys and Generation V, I knew he was who I wanted to get. Ocean, how are you doing today?
Hello, Matt. Thank you very much for inviting me to your show. I've been a big fan. Like a lot of the things you're doing, there are times that I actually listen to the show and think, "Hey, this is the show that I should have thought of. I should have thought of." But since you've already thought of it, I then didn't want to just completely try to copy your idea. But no, I'm a big fan of the show and really appreciate the invitation and look forward to being here and talking to you about all things. Not X-Men, although The Boys and Gen V there's a lot of X-Men correlation.
For sure. And I know that feeling because when you talked about your podcast being about sports movies and the like, as some people have noticed, the definition we use of superhero has expanded quite a lot, and we've done a few sports movies in the last couple months. So yeah. I hear you there.
Yes.
And I do want to say for people who haven't seen this show, we are going to have a lot of spoilers. But this is not going to be a classic review kind of thing. We're going to be talking about some of the questions from it. So we're not going to give like a full plot summary. I don't think you need to know too much. But if you are familiar with the basic idea of The Boys, this is a universe in which superpowered people exist because they've been given something called Compound V at some point in their childhood or even as adults. And superheroes are commercial. It's very much a business run by this corporation called Vought. Not coincidence that the thing is Compound V and Vought. And in the spin-off show, Generation V, it's about college kids. It's about there being a college called Godolkin University, often referred to as God U. And if that sounds fairly arrogant, well, that's part of the point we're going to discuss. Yeah. Specifically for college-age kids who are superheroes. And they're going there at a time when the identity of being a superhero is very much in question. And in the overall universe, there's been this sort of push, because one of the things is that superpowered people are pretty much completely without any restraint. And they do a lot of quote unquote good while killing a lot of people along the way and often doing it completely for their own ends. The show has been about how we deal with that. And Generation V is about what does it mean to be a college kid with superpowers in that universe where there's a whole corporate structure around becoming a superhero. There might be some moral questions for you, but there's often not enough. And all of a sudden, the idea of being a superpowered person is this very controversial thing that a lot of people want superpowered people to rule. Other people think those superpowered people should be reined in or controlled in some way. And if any of this sounds like things around modern day politics, it very much is. And there's all sorts of allegories that we're going to talk about. And so before we go into the specifics, Ocean, let me just ask you, kind of what's been your overall experience watching The Boys and now Gen V?
Well, The Boys, that show I fell in love with instantly. When I saw the first season, I had not yet read the comics. And so what I ended up doing is, I think really between seasons 1 and 2, I bought all the graphic novels, read them all, and it really kind of expanded that universe for me and, kind of seeing where they were trying to go with things with the show. There are parts of that where I think, well, I ruin some things for me because I think about certain things in the show from the context of the comics and wonder, so then I'm like, being my typical X-Men comic book nerd of, hey, they wouldn't do that exactly that way. But the show itself is good. And I think that they've done a really good job of trying to portray what superheroes would be like if they had the ethics of normal people. A lot of times superheroes in our myth have these ethics that are so much better than ours, or the ethics that everybody aspires towards, and that they're really trying to help people. Whereas in this universe, the superheroes really aren't trying to help anyone. They're really it seems to be fighting crime to sell their movies.
Yeah.
And they're doing it really as an advertisement for the entertainment arm of their life. And they behave analogous to how you would normally think of, how actors would behave, or people that are being, hero worshipped and are allowed to get away with things that otherwise they would not normally. I think their powers have something to do with that, but I think a lot of it too is the structure of their world, in that they're really just superpowered actors. And the college for Generation V, that one took a little bit more for me to grow to, because that was setting it down, and that was really kind of where they dove really headlong into that idea of not only the ranking system, which is what I understood. What the ranking system is, we're going to rank people on who's the best superhero and who's not, and pit them against each other and do that, and that all made sense to me. But then, as far as superheroes with lesser powers, how they were viewed as such, is where how could they utilize these powers in the entertainment industry and only do things that way, and that seemed to be their goals and their focus, not how could we take these powers that are not as really destructive and help people.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot in these shows that I think really makes clear that the writers of the original comic books and of the show are very aware of the comic book universe out there, and are in many ways both doing loving kind of discussions of it, and at some points parodies or kind of playoffs it. And I will say, as someone who'd watched the X-Men, and granted, I've not gone too deep in the comics, so I know if you go real deep, this isn't always the case. Yeah. But I've commented that I thought it's kind of interesting that this X gene gets awakened, and all of a sudden we have people who are all having genetically spontaneous mutations, all of which seem to have high levels of combat utility. That's kind of funny.
in the X-Men universe, yes.
And in this, it's not always the case. There's people who shrink size, and that can be helpful sometimes, but not always. Right. There's people who their feet basically their big toes are opposable thumbs. You've got all kinds of things from the ridiculous, and as you said perfectly, I think it's not great people, and the idea that power corrupts is really a theme of this. And there's an awful lot about that idea of what happens when everyone's looking up to you and everyone thinks you're the greatest and putting you on the pedestals. And so there's an awful lot of debauchery. There's an awful lot of the accidental or at times intentional killing of non-superpowered people that just kind of gets shrugged off. And in many ways, the show is as much talking about our social media world as it is talking about superhero ideas, because every time a hero is about to go do something heroic, they make sure that someone's recording it for Instagram. And they talk a lot about likes and how do you get that 1 millionth viewer and stuff like that. And it's just, it's wonderful how it plays all those things against each other.
Yes, it is. It does lean into the meme of if it doesn't happen on Facebook, it didn't happen. So they do go a long way with that. I think that the Gen V really leans into that a lot more. With the boys, you have the extra added element of the other of Butcher's team and everything, and who the boys actually are and what they're trying to do and their anger with superheroes. But with Gen V, and one of the things I do like and appreciate about it is that it does seem to strip down and focus more on your superpowered beings, but then also introduces a lot of extra complexity in how they navigate this world. I'm really interested in the juxtaposition between the ranking system and how the ranking system seems to be for those that haven't seen it in the show, they have like a top, I believe it's top 10. I don't remember if it's top 10 or top 15, but they have a top 10 superheroes and they rank them, and it's like they're the top members of the class, and they're most likely to go on and be a part of the 7 or be super special superheroes. But in reality, that those rankings seem to be based primarily on their ability to destroy, and their combat abilities. How bad can you destroy? How well can you do in a fight? How much could you rule over others? Or purportedly protect people, and then everybody else is just funneled into something else. And so how they then also deal with the fact of they are dreaming of being these other people that are otherworldly superheroes that are worshipped and adored, but then view less of themselves, even though sometimes they have amazing abilities. They can mimic people for certain periods. So there was one guy that disappears, so he can be invisible at all times, and and these are amazing abilities that can be used for a lot of things. But their world, the world they're in, is structured to make it where they are only envious of those that are better fighters.
Yeah, it's really, there's two kind of like majors you can have at this college, and that's what decides what classes you can take. And one is crime fighting, and the other is social media, is being an influencer. Yes. And there's very much a caste system, where like the crime fighting is on top, and you're kind of looked down on a bit if you're doing social media. And even there, it's not meant to be like social media to like draw attention to causes. It's, so for example, one of the characters is able to shrink herself quite a lot. As we learn, she has to like really damage her body and her soul to kind of do that. But she does it, and she comes in with this following as Little Cricket, where it's kind of this online thing where she makes these fun Instagram videos of her being miniature size and interacting in the world in that way, in kind of fun, silly ways. And a lot of it's about her kind of like struggling to get past that identity, because at the end of the day, all these are kids. And so all the things you're talking about, Ocean, are so true, magnified by the fact that they're 19 and they're full of hormones and they're trying to navigate all of that. And they're away from home for the first time and dealing with the fact that they don't know who they are. And everyone's telling them you either got to fight crime or get a lot of likes on whatever the social media platform is.
Right. And Little Cricket is also a great example for someone who could have a power that would help you with a cause, because there's the initial part of it where she, effectively has the, it almost feels like body dysmorphia, where to get large, she has to binge eat, and to get small, she has to then, purge, and that how she could take that and say, which is easy to say, hard to do, of course, if you have that to then say, okay, well, I can go public with how I feel or what's going on with me, and then use that as an allegory to help people that, hey, if you're also struggling as well, look at me, I have this really cool ability that goes along with this, but I still have the same emotions and still downward feelings about myself that I get from doing these things and these actions. And that could be a way to then help someone else that may be going through the same thing as you. Now, Granted, 19, that's asking for a lot of maturity out of someone to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But I think part of it is the structure of this world makes it, unfortunately, where the idea would never have even crossed her mind. That she would only view it as, because I'm lesser and because this power does not suit for these other things, then I not only can't help anybody, I'm just trying to, fit in or be better, however I'm defining better of myself. And so then it creates where you lose that opportunity of where her abilities could be used to help people to, and help other people get better. But instead, she just, she's going to be the fun person at the party. She drinks way too much, does a lot of things that are, sexually promiscuous with her powers and abilities, and things like that, which are, kind of keeping her to be the fun, funny, quirky girl that can then, hang out with the cool kids. Instead of viewing herself of value and worth, and then trying to figure out, hey, how do I then not only feel better about myself, but how can I also help others?
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, her power set is pretty similar to Ant-Man's. Not quite the punching ability, but in terms of all the spying and stuff like that. And later she gets to turn super big and fight like that. Yes. But she starts out very much in this social media place. And in one of the things I think that is such biting commentary on our own world, while also really telling you a lot about their own, one of the stories that gets introduced is that she's befriended by another girl in the class who's also in the social media world, and who realizes that she's making herself vomit in order to make herself small, and who approaches it from the perspective of someone having an eating disorder. And
yes.
And the thing is that that's originally portrayed as her really being sympathetic to her, and I think there is a degree of that. But then the next thing she does is goes to her own social media and does this very kind of virtue signally, like, hey, I just want to let you all know that I know about our friend who has this problem, and it's a good time to talk about why this is a big problem. And it's the kind of thing that really kind of makes it seem like whatever level of sincere caring there might or might not be, she's also completely opportunistically taking advantage of her friend's whatever is going on with her to exploit it for her own social media gains, and then gets incredibly defensive when that's brought up to her.
Yes, but I think that storyline as well is very much, I guess you could say, you know, the Law and Order typical cut from the headlines. Feels, it all feels very Mean Girls. It feels like a very normal thing to do. It was one of the things that I found interesting about that story arc and that storyline was that, as awful and horrible as that is, where you're taking advantage of someone who is feeling down to then, you know, get better likes for yourself, it did feel the most grounded in reality. There was several aspects of that where it, you know, you could think of on a lesser level, or really even the same level, to say, you know, that someone would do that exact same thing. Somebody famous has an eating disorder of some kind. I need more likes on my following. And if I have this exclusive story that I've now, that I've gotten, then, hey, now you guys will all like me more. And that to me is a thing that is interesting to me for when I watch Gen V, and I don't know if you have the same thing, where part of it, the enjoyment, is the escaping from reality, but then they have stories like this that just really kind of smack you in the face with reality. This is all, the only part of that story that isn't realistic is she wouldn't actually become 6 inches, you know, small, or like, you know, 60 feet tall. But outside of that, everything else about that story felt very realistic. And then I had to, you know, then you have to grapple and think about reality. And it's like, well, I'm not trying to think about reality. I just want to see superheroes fight.
That's fair.
You know, so.
And I'll say that's the way we may approach this differently, because to me, what I like is the kind of philosophical question of what would our world be like if there were superheroes in it. And so I like that the show is sort of both saying, well, here's ways that our worlds would be completely different. Like, for example, there's no such thing as the Olympics for normal people anymore, because now you have people who can race, you know, incredible speeds. And so they do racing.
Right.
But also says, like, I like when it says, and here's the ways that our own world would translate into this. But I totally get that it's not, it is much more the realism part of it.
Yes, very much so.
So let me switch to the more superhero side. I started with this allusion to Magneto. And what I mean by that is that by the time we get to the second season of Generation V, and this is after there have been 4 seasons of The Boys, I believe 4 seasons of The Boys, and then the last season of The Boys is coming soon, and that's going to wrap up this whole storyline.
Coming in May.
But yeah, I'm excited for that. And in that world, the sort of superheroes have figured out that, you know, everything was being run by these non-powered individuals for money. That, as the former head of the company once said, they're not a superhero company, they're an entertainment company, and now a pharmaceutical company. And they don't like that, and so they've actually taken over. And there's been all this government shenanigans and like a fight of pro-superhero people and anti-superhero people, and in ways that, unfortunately, Ocean are very much mirroring her own world.
Absolutely.
There's been a big, taking the concerns of the people who are anti-superhero and making them all out to be pedophiles and conspiracy theorists, and taking peaceful actions they're doing and making them seem very violent. But the end result of it is that a lot of the superheroes are now especially those who aren't aware of all of that and are kind of just getting the media as it comes to them, they're feeling like they're being attacked from all sides. They're feeling like they can't trust anyone but themselves. And a lot of them are starting to wonder, wait, aren't we just better than everyone? Shouldn't we just have kind of superhero supremacy, or at least superhero separation, and super-powered people getting to rule ourselves? As you're watching this, did you get kind of echoes of Magneto the way I did?
Oh, absolutely. I honestly was waiting for a Homelander to say that they were homo superior, because that was his Magneto's whole thing was that. It was, I think that they straddled the line very well about how it does feel, for better or for worse, very current times about right left. A lot of it is towards misinformation in news, misinformation reporting. If you were able to control the narrative, you're then able to control what people's perceptions are, whether or not they are true. And so, that mirrors a lot of our times. And I did feel that what they have, and this is, similarly to our times, and what I think the superhero part brings in is the question of, should superheroes rule everything because we are better than everybody else? while I don't think the answer is yes, I still think it is a legitimate question to ask. If you had people that were able to do all of these great and wonderful things, and then you viewed yourself as a hero, as I can help out more things, I can do things better, then maybe I should be in charge and running things, because these people are not running things the way that, that actually benefit everybody. And so it makes it, while it's a legitimate question to ask in the confines of the story and everything, it does then start to just come across as really one, I think, because they refer to themselves as species. It's almost like one species is then, trying to take over the actions of the other. And so I think that there are the two levels of it, with the boys where it's much larger, and with the colleges where it's much smaller, because there's the entire plot with Dean Cypher, because Dean Cypher really is doing the same thing. He is really trying to, even though he is ultimately, with everything that happens with him, where he's actually possessed by, Godolkin from the, for the past 40 years or however long it was. But he's really trying to do the same thing. He is really trying to say, hey, let's take this idea of that we are better and we should be running the world, and then train and generate the next generation of superheroes that will then actually take that into action.
Right. Yeah, and it's really powerful. And it's, yes. I think one of the things that the show does so well, both the boys and this, is showing you how things look from different characters' perspectives, to the point where you're able to be sympathetic to, on some level, even the most awful of people in this world. Not that it justifies their actions, but you can understand where they're coming from. And I think at the end of the first season, there was this conflict between those who wanted to kind of big spoilers here for the end of season 1, but it was discovered that people who were afraid of superheroes and wanted to control superheroes, completely understandable goals, I think, in this universe, had come up with a virus that could completely genocide and wipe out all superheroes.
Yes.
Which makes a lot of the people, even those who were like, I don't think it's good that we superheroes have so much power. Wait, you want to kill all of us? That's not cool either. And so this is all now happening in that world where they're looking at, like, even those people who think, wait a minute, some of us, Homelander being kind of the one you mentioned, he's kind of the Superman equivalent, but not with the ethics and morals of Superman. And he is so kind of run amok that a lot of these superpowered people might think we maybe should be controlled. Maybe we do need some limitations on us. But now they're looking at a world that just tried to genocide them. And so, of course, when someone says all those humans want to kill us, we have to be careful, we have to protect ourselves. I think the show does a great job of showing why that would be a very seductive message.
It does. And I think that, in line with how the show does show what would happen in reality, I do feel that again is an area of where it kind of is, where that it is really kind of true, in that the idea of that you would have a superhero genocide or build out a disease or a weapon to kill them all. It does seem to make, especially in the constructs of the show, some sense, because the one thing that I definitely look at with this and kind of struggle with as far as when I'm trying to put this in reality is, it does feel like they don't help people. Right. It paints a broad brush, as in they have some power, so they're super selfish and self-absorbed and only care about themselves and don't actually do anything that benefits you. However, they can kill you. The kind of like in the opening episode, he's A-Train just running really fast, and he runs right through. And I do not remember the girlfriend's name, but runs right through his girlfriend, and then and then just is like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm running late, and then takes off. Doesn't even pause for a minute to help or anything else like that. And then even anything discussing with that is all just PR. And so I think that what I found for myself with that as well is that not only are you identifying with people that have bad morals, or bad ethics or even bad ideas, I did find that like it was the one time where I was like, hey, okay, getting to the point of where I want to commit a superhero genocide actually does make some sense. If I think that they only are harming us, they're only hurting people, they're only killing people, they're not doing anything else other than causing damage at multiple levels in society, and so it just seemed to be a natural response to it. But then I question sometimes with that of how much of that is because if you're in that world that's what you think, because that is kind of the world more of the boys, whereas in the Gen V world you would never think of a genocide. That just seems ridiculous because they're not all bad. They're not all trying to kill you. You know what I mean? Some of them are just kind of just trying to live their lives and trying to figure out who they are. And I find those stories to be very interesting on the smaller scale about who they are and what they're trying to be and how they express themselves, not only from Emma, but also for me specifically, Jordan, and how they express themselves and what they are going through in life. That I like. I liked those stories and I enjoyed that part of Gen V and welcomed it as a departure from The Boys, where The Boys was very much a zero sums game, and that's how The Boys makes me feel. Is that it's zero sum. Someone has to win, and someone else has to die.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and I want to say more about Jordan for sure. But just on this other topic, what I think you're kind of getting at is the show is saying a lot about how we treat the other, and in The Boys especially. The superheroes are all in their camp and the humans are all in their camp, and both just see the other in terms of the worst thing that the worst member of the other group has done. And that's how they're judging each other. And in The Boys, there's a real tension between people like Butcher, who can only see the boys through the worst, only see superheroes through the worst things that they've done. And then the fact that there are two people who have romantic relationships, four people really in two relationships between a normal human and a superpowered person. But the fact is that those conversations between those two are so rare. And I think one of the things that I really like about Gen V is, you're right, it lets us see so many more of the superheroes. It lets us see, in The Boys, we're just seeing the superheroes 90% of the time as the antagonists. And if they're not actively doing horrible things, then they're being incredibly debauched and they're just losing themselves in these using their superpowers for pornographic purposes. And nothing wrong with porn, but it's not with full consent of people. There's sexual assault happening. There's taking advantage of people. There's all sorts of terrible stuff happening. And in Generation V, we get to see these are real people. We get to see that wider range that helps you, as you said, move beyond that. Okay, we can only see you as this threat that therefore needs to be genocided.
Yes, but I think too the interesting question about that, even if you take it into that next logical thing, is what is it that could be done to create an equilibrium? Right. And that is one of the questions I find interesting in this is, even with the push pull and back forth, the zero sum game part, that one I understand how that works. But then with even inside the institution of Gen V, in the first season, the first dean, even though yes, she was making a device for a genocide of all superheroes, it felt somewhat more like she was trying to figure out how to create an equilibrium, even though that was a misdirection of the show. But it is to me the interesting part about when I think about superheroes in our world, the debauchery and the violence are the things that I think, well, of course that'll happen. What would you do if you could do all these superpowered things? Right. That argument makes sense. But I do find it interesting to try to figure out, and whenever the show even approaches trying to talk about, hey, how could we coexist and live in equilibrium and happy together, that in the stories it always fails. But what I find with myself, and this I guess maybe a question for you, is that I don't always necessarily have a better answer. They haven't presented, anytime they come close to, hey, let's try to make this all work where humans, or I guess Homo sapiens and Homo superior can live together in harmony, it doesn't work. And a lot of times, people, I myself, like anyone else, like to think, oh, you know what? I could have come up with a solution for that. And here's how you fix it. And I look at this and I'm like, I'm not sure how you would fix this. And I was curious if you ever given any thought to what do you think would be either done, or even a first couple steps about, hey, if they started down this path, maybe they could figure out a way to peacefully coexist.
So there's a couple of things here, and I'm going to talk a lot about the X-Men actually, because I think in this regard it is very similar. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I'll say, because I think is relevant here, is that obviously a lot of things in this show, like in the X-Men, are stand-ins for discussion of tensions between minorities and majorities. And how you find that balance, and when it is oppression and when it is equality and all these things, and as much as the X-Men is a very good metaphor for those things a lot of the times, and sometimes is overused. People who just absolutely insist that it's Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, it's not anywhere near that simple. Neither is Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, to be clear, but there's always the difference of, and this is kind of what you're getting at, is assumptions about people of any particular group, like race or religion or gender or sexuality, like there's always this mythology of like, oh, they're dangerous because, or they're different, they're not as smart as us, or they're smarter than us, or whatever it is, they control all the money, or whatever it is. And we always know that that's bullshit. With superpowered people, though, that's not true. There is an actual reason for the majority to be scared of the minority. And even just saying that sounds terrible, but there is some level to it. And it's funny because for the most part, it's kind of why I both love and hate the show, because for the most part, I'm very much a Professor X is kind of an idiot and Magneto probably has much more the right idea. Not the supremacy, but we've got to be willing to fight and not just like take everything, always be worried about showing them that we're not dangerous. But I think what this universe kind of needs is a Professor X. I think that there's an extent to which what the universe needs is someone on the superpowered side who's willing to say, wait a minute, we are out of control and there's a reason why humanity is terrified of us. And the oppression is not, we don't, being genocided is obviously horrible. Any kind of oppression or discrimination would be wrong. But we are acting like, demigods with no control. And like, because I think that, the reason why there's no equality or balance is because there's no checks or balances. There's nothing that's holding, when superheroes do murder non-superpowered people, there's no accountability. There's nothing to hold any of that into account.
Right. So then, that really then sounds like the ending of Gen V, especially this season, is starting to try to maybe plant the seeds of that. Like the equivalent, like Starlight would be that person that is, the superpowered person is saying, hey, let's scale this back. Starlight, and to a lesser degree, A-Train as well. Hey, let's scale this back and try to figure out and how to coexist with them. And so, I guess I can see that in the struggle of that, and that how that counterbalance weight would definitely help out. But again, it would be, I think a lot of times too, it would be obviously a long process, because it'd have the same problem of X-Men, where when the two sides, two coalitions of this then have any conflict, the outright devastation that will be in their wake will be very large and massive, and therefore create the impression among all normal people that, hey, they are something to be feared and we should try to eliminate them.
Right.
But I do see, I think that they're starting to go down that path with that. And I think I could see how that would be somewhat helpful, but then there is still the fact of like, like little throwaways, like how can you possibly keep a bank secure if you have someone that can, walk through walls or do things like, how do you establish any type of normalcy to society when you have beings that can do things this much more powerful than the average person?
So, one of my best friends is Paul. He's been on the show a lot. He was the original co-host, and he's a professional poker player. And he loves the kind of questions we talk about. And we've had some interesting discussions about, let's imagine a world where people could read minds.
Okay.
Would that person be allowed to play to professionally gamble, to play poker? And on the one hand, the idea of discriminating against people based on who they are, it just for very obvious reasons strikes all of us as wrong, and that you shouldn't assume someone is going to misuse a power that they could misuse. On the other hand, if someone the whole point of poker is that no one else knows what my cards are. And if you have the potential to read my mind and know what my cards are, or just to see out of some weird way, whatever it is that not a huge possibility for cheating? And I don't really know. And I think, to me, that's part of what I find so fascinating about this is I feel like shows like this hold up that mirror and say, hey, the rules of our society are built around the idea that everyone is basically within the same range of power. Steve Phelps can swim in a way that no other human being can. And there are people who are born with, disabilities or whatever, who are not going to be anywhere close to that. But that's the range. You're not going... No one can swim the entire ocean, probably. But here, of course, the range of possibility is so much wider that, maybe we have to, I think it's such an interesting question, because we have to rethink that. We have to think, like, how do you build a jail for someone when 99% of cops can't do anything to a superpowered person.
Right.
You know, how do you build a jail for someone who, and I'm normally pretty anti-prison system, to be quite clear, but you know, that's what we're looking at.
Yeah.
How do you build a jail for someone who can turn to a tiny size and sneak out?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I like the question about the person that could read minds playing poker, and I would, at least for me, and then I guess I'll throw my 2 cents in on this. And you can let me know where the argument is good or falls apart. Is that fundamentally different than if you took steroids? You know, in that you have, we do things where it's like, okay, like if you take football or baseball, baseball, or basketball, any of those, and say, okay, well, we make it where you cannot take steroids, and so, because taking steroids is going to give you this extra advantage, and so and we've decided that is cheating, and so would the ability to read minds in a game like poker count as a similar vein? Be like, hey, you've basically taken a steroid, even though it is who you are. You know,
Right.
you were born with this steroid that makes it where you are far way beyond better than what is there. And so while I think ethically that question is, you know, then I'm saying, am I judging you by who you are? I think that if I were to then take that, it reminds me of this question. So I did all
Right.
that preamble to get to this question. It reminds me of a question of, golf. So golf, of course, is a game where angles and vision and the ability to see and what you can do with that and everything is very paramount to the game. And so Tiger Woods had LASIK surgery that gave him 20/15 vision. And so when he did that, now that does create an obvious advantage in this game, but then this modification just is who he is now. He can just see
Right.
really well. And is that then cheating? Or, you know, is that the same thing as if he were to take steroids, even though what he did is he altered himself in a way that we'd be okay with almost anyone else doing it. But then in the context of this game, because it creates another advantage, is that then okay? Because now it's who he is. It's not he took some drug.
Right. No, I think it's a great question, and that's part of why I brought up the Michael Phelps example earlier, because, and I'm not an evolutionary biologist, I don't know all the details here, but my understanding is, like, both in terms of his arm length, but even more so, there's some sort of like what would in some regards be seen as a defect, but definitely a difference in you know, because genetic mutations are actually happening in our species all the time. They're just often so tiny and imperceptible that we don't really notice. Michael Phelps has one, though, in regard to the way his lungs process oxygen. And so it is genetically, he is able to hold his oxygen far longer, and that really helps his swimming. I'm probably getting the biology wrong. Please don't at me about that, but you get the basic idea.
Yes.
And sometimes when we talk about the kind of like, it's impossible to have these conversations without at least being aware that like a lot of the conversations about like trans people in sports and stuff is about that. And often Michael Phelps is brought up of if the concern is that you don't want people who aren't within the same genetic range, Michael Phelps is definitely outside of that. And the same way, I think you're right. The thing with Tiger Woods and LASIK becomes interesting. Of course, everyone else could take LASIK if they have LASIK if they wanted to.
Correct.
And
Right.
could
Everyone
afford
can
it.
do that. Yeah.
And of course, that's the steroids idea. And of course, and then the problem being, like, LASIK, as far as I know, doesn't have any real negative side effects, although it's certainly very expensive. Steroids absolutely does. But even there, I think, for me, I think a lot of the question has to come down to agency. Because Tiger Woods is still getting to choose to have that surgery. And so you can say, like, a person's choice, you can judge a person on their choices. And so, like, if I went to have a surgery that made me a mind reader, I think then someone could be like, no, absolutely not. You intentionally gave yourself an ability to cheat at this game. We're not going to let you cheat. But for you, is there difference between someone who chooses to have the power and takes an affirmative action to do that versus someone who is just born with it?
I don't. Okay, so I guess controversial is somewhere for me. No, I would view them
That's fair.
both. I view them both as, in a sense, you could be cheating in either scenario. Now, the cheating, though, I think that is really then I have to back up and say, well, how am I defining that? So I think that really in all things of variation and deviation, especially in any type of athletic endeavor, or really just in society as a whole, we've determined things as far as ranges and what the line is. So so a great example, Michael Phelps is a great example, not only with his lungs, but I think there's even stuff with his, like the way his limbs are and everything. Like he's built.
Yeah, I mean, his arm length is just very
right.
outside of the norm of humanity.
Correct. And so then, but even with that variation, it's still within the range of what we all consider acceptable. Whereas, let's say he had the ability to stretch, or let's say his arms were actually, like, I don't know, let's say 10 feet long arms gave you an advantage of that, and he just happened to be born that way. Would we still then allow him to then participate in this? I don't know. I don't know where the line is or where the range is, but I think that people have different things of what they're saying with that, but I view cheating analogous to, and I think the better way to really couch it or to give a better allegory is like gun control, where with gun control, then you have, people have different places of where is the line of the range of where we think it is okay for you to own a gun. Because for some people it's just, the defense of handgun defense. Some of it is hunting. Some of it is AK-15s, and almost nobody is like, yes, you can have bazookas. So that means that since bazookas is way outside of the range, and everyone's going to kind of agree with that, then it becomes where are you putting it on below that. And I think in this case with cheating and any type of ways that you've been altered, whether or not you view it as something that is unacceptable, or I guess unacceptable is the best term. Whether you view it as something unacceptable, is it outside of the range of what you've defined as acceptable deviation?
Right.
And so these, taking it back to the superpowered beings, it's like, well, your powers and abilities, if you can read minds, yes, I probably wouldn't like you playing poker, but I wouldn't necessarily think that you are a danger to me. But if you have the ability, say like Kate does, to control me, right, to your mind reading abilities, you can then touch me and then make me do something that I don't want to do, right? That then would be beyond the range of what I would consider acceptable, and such of where I would view you as a danger. Whereas if you could just read my mind, I would just view you as someone like, maybe I don't want to hang around you because I don't want you knowing my thoughts.
Yeah. I will quickly say, by the way, if you want further exploration of a lot of these mind reading type thoughts, watch the TV show Babylon 5. It's kind of a similar to Star Trek DS9, but its own thing. It's from the 90s, and there's many ways in which it's very 90s in terms of production values and some of the dialogue, but it's a fantastic exploration of some of these questions. Pulling it back, though, to the shows directly, one of the things that I think is so interesting at the time that this show starts, because you and I have been talking about, because you're right, I think in a lot of ways is the question of like cause versus, effect. It is what matters how you got the power, or it matters that you have this power. And how do we view what is or is not an acceptable part of the range of experience that is being judged in an athletic contest, or a game like poker, or just, an academic exam or anything like that, or just life in general. And in this universe, again, there's going to be a big spoiler, but all these people have grown up, and the whole world has thought for now 50 years that it's just kind of natural evolution that some people have these superpowers. And many people, and because again, it's a parallel to our own world, there's a very strong Christian evangelical movement that is very tied up with the superheroes, that is fully convinced that these are God's chosen, that God chooses which people should or should not have superpowers. And then that, by the way, is then again used to say, so therefore we shouldn't be questioning them, we have to trust them. Which, by the way, if you've ever read like 18th, 19th century Christian theology about why we shouldn't question rich people, it's the exact same. It's God has chosen these people to be blessed. Yes. But at this point in the show, it's been revealed that actually all of that is nonsense. That basically, as I said, there's this compound V that's being injected into children, sometimes babies, sometimes embryos, all the way back to that stage. How do you think that would, first just looking from the super powered people themselves, how do you think that would change your sense of identity to go from being told that you've been chosen by God, or just that you're a luck of nature that you have these powers, to now find out that basically someone gave you steroids when you were too young to understand it.
I would think it would shatter your identity.
Yeah.
Especially if you thought of yourself as special beforehand. Now, there's a part of that, though. I think that there's two sides of that. It depends on how you viewed it before. If you viewed it as, hey, this was God chosen me to be special to have these powers, then I think it would shatter your identity. But if you viewed it as, this is God cursing me with these powers, like I don't want this, I don't, that I view these powers that I have as a negative, then I think it would make it where it could help you out. You could be like, hey, this wasn't all the way my fault. People did this to me. Now you could take it the wrong way and do things, you could take it the wrong way and think of it kind of like thinking Gen V, they have Sam, Riordan, R-I-O-R, I don't know how to pronounce
Yeah,
his last name.
one
But
of those,
anyway,
I don't remember. Terrible with names.
he is genetically, from his parents and from his family, has some schizophrenia. But he viewed that the fact that they gave him compound B, that was the source of his problems. And so that his identity changed from where, where I don't know that he ever felt that he was a chosen one, but he felt that he had something to blame for what he thought was wrong with him. Now, that could make it where you feel better. That could make it where you feel rage. It is probably likely the rage, I think, because you're like, hey, someone did this to me and I need to get back because I can't believe you've done this to me. And I think that's what it would do to you if you felt that way. So the way you feel about it after, I think, would be very much driven by how you felt about it before.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing the show does really an interesting job with. 'Cause you're right, Sam is an interesting case where he learns that he was schizophrenic already before he had the drugs. And I'll say, for me, as someone who has mental illness that has at times been very severe, I've often felt kind of, cursed by the genetic lottery. And at times, especially when I was younger, been very angry at my parents for this. And that's part of what he goes through. And I think you're right that there can be such this wide range. And I think one of the things that the show really plays up well is that, especially for college kids, that's a time when so much of your identity is flux. Figuring all this out is so difficult already that, having that kind of yanked away from you, whether you saw it positively or negatively, it's how you'd understood your life. Now, all that's changed, and it makes you very vulnerable to being propagandized, to being lied to being manipulated. And one of the things that they do in the show, especially, people like Godolkin and others who want to harness this army of superpowered people, is they give these people who have so many more powers than anyone else a sense of victimization, a sense of, your parents did it to you. The world is out to get you. And I think that's one of the most powerful things the show does, is this kind of showing how even the most superpowered of people, with the right combination of experiences and manipulation, be made to feel like victims and to made to feel like they're the ones who is oppressed compared to anybody else.
Yes, but I think that is also one of the areas of where the Venn diagram of how society is now versus how we be with superpowered beings, it stays the same in that, with the exception of Sage, none of these superheroes seem to have been granted with abilities to have increased cognitive awareness or increased emotional awareness, which may even be better in this situation, where they are still able to be victimized by the standard manipulations that we see in our everyday lives. And that while the ramifications of that manipulation can be much larger than it would be for you or I, because I can't smash a building with my bare hands, but that they still have the same things, and they're still the same. They have the same vulnerabilities, and really in that case which is odd in a way, it's where they're the most human. That they can fall for the same propaganda, they can fall for the same ideas, they can be told, if you're told you're special enough, you start to believe it whether or not it's true. And if you're told that there's something wrong with you, if you're broken, if you're told that your whole life as well, taking it back to taking it back to religion, since I also grew up in a very religious family and everything, and so you're told there are certain people that respond different ways to being told that you're born a sinner, you're born something wrong with you, right? And so and the thing that's wrong with you is just because of the act of you being born. And so if you're told that your whole life, you would then you'd have these negative impressions and feel bad and violent. And if you're told you're special, you'd be the same, and you'd be great. you would think that you're more special than you really are. And I think that is an area of where the juxtaposition, getting back to 10 things ago, the juxtaposition of how would this behave in the real world, I feel that is one area of where it is the same. They all can be manipulated, and that if you have the ability to manipulate people, that you could do well in the universe with superpowered beings and without.
Right. No, I fully agree with you. And that's where, and this might be where we differ some, but that's one of the things that I love about this kind of science fiction is when it's saying, we're going to create a situation completely different than any you're used to, but also in order to make a commentary about something that happens in our own world. Yes. And there's one other part of this that I just want to highlight. It's a kind of a throwaway plot aspect, but I think is so brilliantly done. Because it is easy, I think, to look at this and feel like this is very much kind of like a leftist woke show. And I think in many ways it is. And like there's definitely a lot of connotations between the evil superheroes and the right in a lot of the things that they do. But I think the show is also pretty eager to skewer the left and things like that. And one of my favorite moments from this, because I think it is such a perfect example of, and I say this as someone who's a college level activist. I was the head of the Young Socialists at my college. Incredibly I was the person who wanted to organize all the on-campus workers and had never had a conversation with any of them. Right. Perfect example, spoiled white privileged liberal. But there are people on the campus who hate what's happening with Homelander, and they want to support this Starlighter movement. They want to support the resistance. And so every day they use their powers to very sneakily put up a sign that says resist and has the Starlighter symbol at the local coffee kiosk on campus. And it's like, okay, it's not a huge deal, but it's students taking an act of resistance. The thing is that by doing it, of course, because no one knows who's doing it, everyone assumes that the human who works at that coffee shop is the one who's doing it. And she gets harassed and she gets threatened. And clearly her mental health is deeply, troubled by all this. And at times her life is put in danger. And it's clear that the students who are doing it have no idea. And to me, and again, this is something that's very much more real world, but it was such a perfect example to me of what it means to be in a place of privilege, to have a very genuine desire to advocate on behalf of those who don't have the privileges you do, but to have no idea of the impact that you're having and that you're actually causing more harm than good.
Yeah. Wow. That one. Yeah. No, I had not thought of that one, but yes, no, I can see where that is, but sorry, I'm gonna have to process that one for a second. I had not thought about that. You're right. That their heart is all in the right place, and that for where they're thinking about things in the macro, that they would need that if hopefully they can convince others to join their side, but in the micro because of where they're putting it, they are actually causing pain and suffering for the type of people they want to have. Yeah, no, that is. Yes, no, that is I will admit you've got me on that one. That one is one where I hadn't thought about that interesting little twist. And while I did definitely say before, there are times where I like my superhero stuff being all this, super. I want to see him fight. I want to make sure I was, but I do very much like when they have these different ethical issues, and so
for sure,
and that. While I don't have a good response to that one, the one that I do find interesting that I want to pivot to that says the same thing, it was the character of Jordan that I mentioned earlier. And that the because it definitely does tie into whether or not is it a woke show, and are they doing things, because it is, clearly that is the statement on, transgender and the ability to flip back and forth in gender, because there are powers.
Just for those who haven't seen, so Jordan is quite literally by gender in that they have a presentation that is fully female and a presentation that is fully male. And they are able to switch that physical look. And I don't mean like just, it's two different actors, which I think is a very intentional choice to be like, this is not a person who can kind of like gender flip the way we think of in our own world. This is a distinctly different power that breaks all of our ideas of gender.
Yes.
So sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, absolutely. And interestingly enough, I think with the writing with that character, the different genders have different powers.
Yeah.
Where in the female form she's more at least it seems to me intelligent, and then just has the force blast, and in the male form is this indestructible person that can just is really strong and indestructible, and that's it.
Yeah.
But that they are very different. And so and it took a bit for me when I started, because when I first saw the show, I was just kind of appreciating, oh, that's a little cool ability, and then as things go on, you start to see how the show is trying to show, how the show is trying to demonstrate, to not overuse the word show, about how someone could, when you have these dualities in you, or if you think about yourself differently, and is Jordan male, is Jordan female, right? I don't think, I think of them as both, because they're flipped back and forth so much. But the other part of the show that I liked was, while you you grow with Jordan throughout the seasons, and you think about things more about from their point of view and perspective, and how they want to be treated normally, even though they have this power and ability that has actually even caused consternation with their family life at home as well. But that, and then they are constantly told, hey, well, we can't really push you too much, because in certain areas of the country, they're not going to accept, someone that can change genders, which when you're watching it, you think, well, that's stupid. That's just, crazy. Why would they think that? But then there's the other part of it where it's like, okay, I understand, and I guess I kind of then also get that what they are showing is that, like, hey, even though we have grown with this character and this person and this ability and going to accept it, that not everybody is going to be where we are. And then that is, kind of part of what society is. And it's just showing another avenue of how, they're wanting to be accepted as being normal is difficult, especially given that transformation between genders is so distinct that you then don't know, like you never, and I think it's an interesting part of the show, I never think of which one is the base gender, because they do just say a couple times which gender they were born with, but it really doesn't matter, and that how it is hard to, the multi-layered part of that I think is interesting with them. And I always say, I notice I say her more than sometimes every now and then, because I do think of the female part, which is I think part of the writing. She seems the writing seems to make it where she seems more like she's like the female part is the brains of the operation, right? Even though Jordan's always the same both sides. The female is with brains, but anyway, that they the interesting thing to me, and I know I'm saying this, I'm kind of stumbling around to get this, but all the different layers of Jordan's character of how they be perceived in society, and that how it is any person then interacting with them could be put off by the fact of, and when I say put off, meaning just having a hard time understanding and distinguishing when they go back and forth, and how Jordan can try to, how do you then also try to get people to treat you normally when, in a sense, who you are and the exhibition of your powers makes it where they're going to treat you differently, because as a society, we do treat males and females differently.
Yeah,
and that's not necessarily bad, because there are just differences of how we interact with people of each gender. And if you have someone flipping back and forth between each, how do you then reconcile and come to grips with, how should I interact with this person?
Right. I think you made a couple of really good points there. And first of all, just say, I mean, obviously I'm having fun teasing you about the escapism thing.
Oh,
but
yeah, absolutely.
I know, even I think you can want escapism and still also want really deep ethical questions. But I know for you, it's both. That's part of why I wanted to have you on, because I've heard you talk so well about these topics and other things. And Jordan is such an interesting character and is so well portrayed, I think, because first of all, again, to show this, like, the dangers coming from both directions, there are characters in the show. One of them is Jordan's father, who does wish that Jordan was just male and wants, is very uncomfortable clearly with that part. On the flip side, before Jordan becomes a rebel, you have people from the university who are very much embracing Jordan, but completely for the commercial purposes, And so, They write them a script of, can you say these words? And one of them is like, to coin the term transtastic. And Jordan's like, well, I'm not really trans though. I'm something else. I'm like, no, that's the word you're going to use. And at one point people want to come up to them and take selfies and want them to switch between genders for like two different pictures. And they don't want to do that. They don't want to be like treated like a circus freak or something. Right. But the people are like, no, you've got to do that. You've got to perform this idea, and I think a lot of times we hear these discussions about like Disney or HBO or Netflix. Are they woke? Are they anti-woke? I think they're just capitalist. They're, and when it is, they think they're going to make the most money by having Pride collections, they're going to do that. And when they think they're going to make the most money by pulling it, they're going to do that. And like you said, sometimes they're going to make a movie that is going to be very well marketed to Eastern coastal folks and not marketed at all to the South and whatever it is, or to the big cities and not the little areas, whatever it is. And for me personally, I'll say, as someone who's non-binary, I use they, them pronouns. I'm not Jordan, but I have some of that same feeling of like, I am not quite fitting into either male or female. And I see people wrestle with how do they treat me and what does that mean, especially because I do present in a masculine way. I have a beard and things like that. And there were just a couple of moments what they did with Jordan that I thought were so beautiful in illustrating how some of those things would work. Like there's one time where while Jordan is presenting female, they're driving and they're having some trouble driving. It's a difficult situation and their passengers getting concerned. And Jordan flips gender and says to them, I hope you're not one of those idiots who feels safer if it's a man driving. And they're like, no, it's that you're crashing into things. That's what I'm concerned about. Yes. But the other moment was, and this was the sort of thing that could be so easily badly done, but was so well done. Jordan, again, big spoilers, Jordan and Marie become lovers. And I believe the first time that they flirt or really interact as lovers, I think before they maybe go to bed together, but certainly they have some sexual interaction while Jordan is male. And Marie has not given any indication that she might be anything other than straight up to this point. And so then later they start to have a sexual interaction while Jordan is female. And she kind of does a check. I say she in that moment, but they kind of do this check-in of, is this okay?
Right.
And Marie says that all of you is okay. Everything you do is okay. And I thought that was such a beautiful moment because I think a lot of times people do feel that they have to perform a certain aspect of gender for their partner, for their lover, or to be attractive or something like that. In the same way that anyone might, if people who are athletes might sometimes feel like they have to, it is their athleticism that people are as attracted to. So they have to always be the one who's kind of like, in shape and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
Whatever it is. But so I just thought those moments were so beautiful because it was the kind of, to me, it hits that line of Jordan is dealing with something I can never understand. That's totally outside of my experience, but I can relate to it because it's similar to my experience.
Oh, yes. No, I do agree that that moment actually did hit me as well. And how I was, there's a part of it that I viewed it as beautiful. And then there was a part of it that I viewed it as, that to me was great writing. It would be easy to cop out and say, no, I only want you that when we're being intimate to present as a man, as opposed to saying that, no, I'm going to accept you as you are fully as a human being and a person. And I think that is part of where, while the relationship between them is such that Marie seems to have much deeper feelings than Jordan will at least express that, that you have certain things of where, people have their guards up for various reasons, but that it was a beautiful piece of writing to say, hey, we're going to build a relationship where, the character who can swap genders is going to be fully accepted by the person that then claims to love them, as opposed to saying, I'm only loving part of you. And I thought that was great. And I think that would be a great thing of where in here, you're almost saying, well, hey, wouldn't that be a great superpower for all of us to have? That we can all accept, all sides of our partners, because whether it is multiple genders or just what at times we can be perceived as, hey, you know what, I love you, but you have too many personalities for me right now, right? Just the mood swings and that whether or not we all accept everything about another person. I think that part was beautiful, especially in the insanity of this universe and how there, that you have that moment, and then they go from there to having what I think are a lot of just the regular conflicts you have in relationships, and is an area of where their relationship is such where it feels normal. It feels written as if they're just going to say, hey, we're just going to write a normal relationship between a couple people, and then put that crazy relationship in this insane world where one of them can swap genders and have force fields and is indestructible, and the other one can explode your head internally by boiling your blood.
Yeah.
Other than that, they're quirky kids trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So.
And I say I always love those shows that are like one part super powered people, one part just normal like high school or college life.
Yeah, exactly.
We've gone about an hour. I don't want to keep it too long. Is there any other last parts of this conversation you wanted to bring up, or other questions or points from the show you wanted to bring up?
No, I think that the main thing that I wanted to bring up, and thank you for letting me doing it, was shoehorning in Jordan. I think that while there's the overall ethical questions of the show, and there are a lot of them, and several that we didn't even get to, but that the one thing I do find the most interesting was Jordan and that character, and how to reconcile, because in the broader context, and honestly I would argue in a non-threatening one, how it is that your powers can be still make people either uncomfortable or unsure of how to deal with you while also not being dangerous. Granted, ultimately the ability with the force field does make them dangerous, right? But at the same time, the problems that people could potentially have in interacting with that person and dealing with that person is, while I have a problem with who you are, the who you are that I have a problem with is not the dangerous part.
Right. I think it's very true. Well, Ocean, thank you so much for being a part of this. I apologize, but you have now volunteered to come back in May when the new season of The Boys comes out, because I would love to have you on to talk about that. To our listeners, let us know what you think. We'd love to hear your comments, your thoughts, your questions. Send them in. We'll definitely talk about them on an upcoming episode. On behalf of myself and Ocean and all of you out there, thank you all so much for listening. May the force be with you.